welcome to another episode of Gripe, the show for short, sweet reviews of new release movies, plus the one thing that annoyed me the most. Today I'm going to be talking about The Shallow, starring Blake Lively and Steven the Seagull. Yep, that's pretty much it. This movie doesn't really have a big cast. It's pretty much entirely on Blake Lively. So, give you a little bit of background. What the movie is Blake Lively plays a med student from Texas who is a surfer, and she's, kind of on this personal odyssey to go find this place that her mom had found, back when she was pregnant with her, long time ago. So she wants to go find this place, this beautiful location, and surf it, basically. When she's there, she finds this place, and it's exactly the one. So there's this kind of like swell of pride that she's found it. So she goes out in the water, surfs surfs the waves a little bit, and then comes back and has a snack on the beach, and calls her dad back in Texas. And you get some of the backstory that her mom has passed away, and so she's kind of questioning whether or not she wants to continue on with med school. And obviously her dad wants her to continue. He wants her to stay the course and continue fighting on, but she's having a lot of doubt because her mom obviously lost a battle with a pretty severe illness. She might have been had cancer or something like that, and basically passed away, in this very emotionally grueling way. They don't really get into detail, but it does give you that kind of backstory of what she's doing there and why it's so crucial for her to be kind of on her own in her own place. And then she goes back out into the water, and when she does, she notices something in the water that happens to be a dead whale. And so when she goes to kind of investigate that, she's attacked by a shark. And the shark basically bites through her leg. It doesn't sever anything, but she gets a pretty severe bite in her leg. And so she's now trying to stay out of the water in order to keep away from this shark that is circling to find her, to basically finish the job. So she, gets on top of the dead whale, and tries to flag down these other two surfers who are there. But unfortunately, she's unsuccessful, and they leave before she can get anybody's attention. And this is as the tide is starting to lower. So, some of the, areas in this kind of bay area you've got like little islands that are forming because the tide is getting lower, and so there's actually places for her to kind of perch until the tide rises again. And she manages to get to this other rock, but obviously with the blood loss and the shark still being there, she's pretty much stuck on this rock. And the movie then becomes this story of how she is surviving on this rock, in the waters with this shark circling around. And as she's on this rock, there's a seagull with her who happened to get injured in when the shark attacked her again while she was on the whale. He basically charged at the whale, and in the chaos of all of it, one of the seagulls got hurt and landed on this rock as well. So she's at least got a companion, a little seagull named Steven. And from there, some other people, somebody shows up, and she tries to, get him to, flag him down, but, he's a drunk and obviously a very shifty person, and starts going through her bag on the beach. And then the other surfers come back, so she thinks maybe she'll finally get some help that way, but obviously the shark is still there and still hungry for blood. So it becomes this, she's completely on her own now. There's no one who knows that she's there, no one coming back for her. And ultimately, the way the story goes is she kind of has this, she gets onto this buoy, and she's able to fight, find a way to fight the shark. She kind of gets this, inspiration of, I'm not gonna, die here. I'm going to continue fighting, and I'm gonna, survive, basically. And then, basically that takes us to the end of the movie, the final confrontation with the shark and beyond. So when I saw the previews for this movie, I was not interested in the least, because it looked like another stupid kind of shark movie. I'm not all that keen on movies that it's just about here's a shark, it's gonna attack everything, because for one, sharks are not that aggressive all the time, and we've had so many movies since Jaws that try to do this exact same thing. But what kind of drew me in a little bit was not only the fact that it did get pretty decent reviews, it's actually certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, but also that it looked more like, instead of the story about, like man versus beast, it was more of this like woman's survival. And I really got that sense throughout the movie, especially like as I'm watching this movie, it felt almost like I was watching Gravity, and instead of a woman being trapped out in space, it was a woman on a rock in the middle of a bay, basically being hunted by a shark that, just as little chance of survival as, Gravity. And the movie is really beautifully shot. That was one of the things that really impressed me throughout. There are obviously a few moments that are a little cheesy and some, visual decisions that I'm not sure I would have agreed with. But overall, the cinematography is fantastic. Especially, there's some great like underwater shots. When she's surfing, when the other guys are surfing, there's some really great, cinematography at that moment. The camera work is fantastic. The direction is it's so subtle. It's not this like there's you almost were waiting for that kind of Jaws moment where like the shark is like coming up. It's like dude and dude and dude and there weren't a lot of those. It was pretty reserved, very patient movie, which is something I probably wasn't really expecting, that it would be so patient. It's certainly I'm not going to call it a horror movie, but it's definitely a suspense. Yes, there is some gore, there is some, certainly some shark violence, but the movie itself is not it's not a horror movie, which I enjoy because at least it makes it more about the character and more about this like struggle to survive than it is about this like maniacal man-eating shark. It's like, why is the shark after them all of a sudden? There's no point. It's kind of silly, except that obviously this is a shark who is injured, who is pissed, who is just looking to eat and to feed. And you have this woman who, in this sort of allegorical sense, is trying to, run away from the past that she, the situation she's in, her past, the tragedy of losing her mother. She's trying to run away from that, and it drives her into a situation where she's kind of forced to, have like a come to Jesus moment where she's forced to question if she can, if she has the strength to continue on doing what she's doing, which obviously pits her against this very real and very violent shark. It's like I said, it's a patient movie, which for a 90-minute movie, it's paced very well. It doesn't, it starts off with, like a GoPro video of, the shark attacking, which kind of gives you the setup that, okay, obviously something goes wrong between this scene and the end of, throughout the movie. Something goes wrong, so it sets it up pretty much right away. But beyond that, it doesn't get into these, it takes its time. It has her it builds her character. It shows like who she is. And I'm not going to lie, Blake Lively did a fantastic job in this movie. For a movie that is this just like basic and almost cliche in a way, she does a really fantastic job of, portraying this woman who at the same is kind of fighting, finding this place of peace that she's been looking for, as well as fighting, the tragedy of her past. And then when she's faced with the confrontation of like kind of, you see the distress in her face, you see like the hopelessness, but then you also see the fire when she does start to, fight back, when she does, challenge the shark, and when she, not only, and pushes herself to survive, basically. Blake Lively does a great job, and I haven't seen Blake Lively in a ton of movies, so I can't necessarily say that she is or isn't a great actress, but in this movie she certainly proved her worth. It's 90 minutes of her, so there's not a lot of opportunity for her to kind of pass that, pass the buck to somebody else and say, okay, now you act well for the next half hour of this movie. No, it's entirely her. And because the shark is a foil in this movie, the shark is kind of there to push her, but it's never this, until the end, when there's, you really get like the climax of the story when she's on this buoy and the shark is just like aggressively going after her. It's not until that moment that the shark really even plays a huge, visual role. The shark is more there to create the tension, to create the conflict. And this movie does do that tension really well. Like, there are moments where you think it's like gonna do like a jump scare. It's like, oh, here's the shark, and a couple moments it does. Obviously they do want to try to, give you those type of scares, but compared to some movies, it certainly wasn't overdone, and that's what I appreciated, is they didn't overdo the the trying to terrorize the audience here. It was more like, there's even a scene where, someone, goes into the water and the shark attacks them, and you don't see the actual attack, all you see is the aftermath. But during the scene, when the shark is attacking this person, you see, like, her reaction to it, because she's watching this happen in real time. You see her reaction, to this horror, and, she plays it well, of like, obviously it's hopeless now. Like there really is no chance for her to move forward from this. And that really does kind of give this movie a, somewhat strong response from me. Because, like, I didn't want this movie to be just, a horror movie. I didn't want it to be a Jaws remake. I wanted it to be something more intimate and personal, which is exactly what it was. It was this more touching story of how this woman was able to, survive these constant barrages from this shark. And, without giving away the ending, obviously, to push her even to fight back and to actually challenge this shark. Now, I'm giving this movie a lot of praise, but that doesn't mean it's perfect. This movie actually does have a couple of pretty glaring flaws. Like, the setup from the beginning, the setup of this movie is a little bit weak in terms of, so her, she's obviously, on her own out there. She's trying to find the shark, or she's trying to, basically find this beach and go surfing and all that, and that's when the shark comes. She basically is by herself, but she's actually down there with a friend, and that friend, at the beginning of the movie basically says, hey, I'm not interested in going today, I'm not feeling well, and then she says, oh, hey, don't wait up for me, I met somebody, so la la la. But the course of the movie takes place over more than just a day. It takes place almost 2 whole days of, time, and so at some point that person should have at least kind of figured out, hey, where is my friend, and done some kind, looked for her at all. So they do, the setup is really weak in terms of, how she ends up there by herself. Because obviously it's a secluded beach, it's someplace that, there's not going to be a lot of people, but she still just, there's no, she just, it's there. And, that one I thought was kind of weak. With the guy who basically, the drunk who shows up, that's another part that was just kind of it was kind of a weird decision to make narratively, because obviously this guy, he just appears on the beach drunk. It's like, where the hell did he come from? And if he's that close to the beach that he could just pass out drunk on the beach, there's got to be more people somewhere around here. It's not like it's this, place that's so cut off from the world that no one would ever know that she's there. Obviously, the surfers do come back, and even when they come back, there's no remains of this drunk guy who, the shark kills. So, there's certainly some believability things that aren't really there. But if I had to give a key gripe, unfortunately, I have to give my key gripe about the ending. And sorry, there's going to be a spoiler here, but the ending basically has an epilogue, and when they end the movie, she basically she basically survives. She kills the shark and is rescued, and then the movie has 1 year later, it shows her with her leg all healed up, and she's surfing again with her dad and her sister and all that stuff. I thought that the epilogue actually kind of hurt the tone of the movie, and kind of, it did wrap it up nicely, but it didn't need to happen. I know that people like to give the happy ending, not just there's a lot of movies that I think should have really they should have ended sooner than they did. This is one of those movies that has like the panic room kind of like, the ending that just went too long. Even though Panic Room ended, like, the ending scene was only like another 2 minutes of the movie, but the way that it ended prior to that was so perfect. It was so perfect for an ending. This movie would have been the same thing. If they had ended the movie when she is rescued and she's on the beach and she has this moment where she sees her mother and she's like, I'm okay. Like, if the movie had ended right there, that would have been perfect. But they gave us a little bit of an epilogue, and I feel like that kind of just like, oh, here's a happy-go-lucky ending, which I didn't think we needed. I think the point of the movie was her coming to terms with this fear of loss, this fear of, not knowing her direction in the world, and, overcoming that with, having the fight to challenge this shark that is just this merciless beast that is after her. And to have that ending there kind of, it wraps it up very nicely. But I feel like in that moment when she's on the beach, it's almost like the ending of The Revenant, where, Hugh Glass basically gets his revenge, and the assumption is he dies at the end, but he has this kind of like moment of like revelation, of kind of like release, and there's no epilogue to that. It's just that's where it ends. That's a good ending. That's a good like way to end a story like this, and I wish they had done that, but instead they gave us this little added epilogue to kind of make it a happy ending, which I was not particularly a fan of. I think that actually hurt the movie a little bit. And the movie had, some other kind of cheesy parts and cliche things, but that one, I just was like, oh, don't do that. Don't end the movie with an epilogue when you have a perfectly good ending when she is rescued on the beach. So, but overall, it's still a surprisingly entertaining movie, and extremely tense. There are a few moments where the tension kind of gets ruined a little bit. The momentum is lost in a sense, but the overall story is very tense, and there's moments where you're just like gripping your seat, like, oh my god. Where is that shark? She like, just by putting a toe in the water, it's like, is this shark going to get her? So, certainly an intense movie, a lot of good action, a lot of good, like I said, beautifully shot film, and Blake Lively does a fantastic job, so, got to give her mad props for that. So, rating-wise, I got to give this movie probably a 7 out of 10. Certainly entertaining, tense, enjoyable. Not perfect by any stretch. It does have some flaws in it, but there's nothing wrong with flaws. Even good movies have flaws, and this one, I would say, is a good movie. Doesn't, it probably could have, done a few things differently. But the director, he's done, such great movies like Unknown. Yes, if you even remember that movie, I do, but only barely. But no, this was a well-done movie, certainly well-constructed, cliche at times, but certainly entertaining, tense, and again, Blake Lively just does a fantastic job. So, if you've seen it, tell me what you think. If you haven't seen it, sorry to spoil it for you, but I kind of had to, because when I think about my key gripe, it's like, that was the one that it really did bug me. Otherwise, it would have been the scene earlier in the movie with the drunk guy. I thought that one was kind of silly, and I wasn't sure why they threw that in there, but that's my review for The Shallows. Let me know what you think in the comments, if you've seen it, if you have any comments to add on your own, or if you agree with me, disagree with me, let me know. So that's my review of The Shallows, and thanks again for watching Key Gripe. I'll see you next time.